Through their history, art, and architecture, the Hermitage Palaces have come to embody the spirit of Russia. Now, as a public museum, the Hermitage offers the world the enjoyment of a collection of treasures gathered over a span of 400 years. Here, nearly 3 million exhibits, housed in 353 galleries, represent a continuing Russian fascination with world art and culture. The idea of a royal art collection began with Peter the Great, but it was Catherine the Great who assembled the heart of today's painting collection. Thanks to the rulers and curators who picked up where Catherine left off, the museum today stands as one of the largest in the world, rivaled only by the Louvre in Paris and possibly the Metropolitan in New York. This program is a unique overview of some of the countless masterpieces in the museum's marvelous painting collection. Let's begin with the gallery of early paintings in the New Hermitage, or in terms of history, at the dawn of Western civilization. What you are seeing is the environment of the ancient world, recreated for the walls of the Hermitage by 19th century artists. Here are the lost paintings of Greek and Roman art. It's a warm Mediterranean world of light, shimmering colors, where artists still puzzle over the rendition of perspective. The elusive secrets would not be fully understood until the Renaissance more than 1400 years later. This theme of artists at work has been a timeless favorite for painters throughout the centuries. The German painter Jürgen Owens was a disciple of Rembrandt in the 17th century. In this self-portrait, he paints himself not as an individual, but as an artist working on a portrait. His brushes and palette are the attributes of his art. Owens' wife is the model, and creativity is the theme. In symbolic terms, her inherent creativity as the potential giver of life echoes his creativity as an artist. He paints her as Flora, the pagan goddess of spring and flowers. This is a self-portrait of the German 18th century artist Anton Raphael Mengs, headmaster of the Rome Academy in Italy. Mengs shows his affiliation with the artistic world by portraying himself with a folder filled with drawings. In the 15th century, the Flemish artist Roger van der Weyden combined piety and creativity when he painted himself as Saint Luke, patron saint of all artists, in the act of sketching the Virgin. In the 19th century, this brilliantly colored fresco was cut from the walls of a destroyed monastery on the outskirts of Florence, Italy, and sold to the Hermitage. The artist is Fra Angelico, the famous 15th century monk and painter. Fra Angelico was a master of fresco painting, a technique that required speed as well as many skilled assistants. First, a layer of plaster is applied. Before the area dries, the painter colors it with pigments diluted in water. Here, Fra Angelico paints in tempera. This Madonna and Child with angels was painted in 1425. In this era, easel pictures usually were painted in tempera. The technique uses egg yolk as a binder for colored pigments. You can see how bright the colors have remained even after 500 years. The Dutch artist Gerard ter Borch, who lived from 1617 to 1681, is the artist of this work, Glass of Lemonade. He is using the 15th century invention of a new painting medium, discovered in the north, the technique of oil painting. The paint dried slowly. It gave the artists more time and control to create details. Artists marveled at their new ability to render textures with oil paint. Faces easily took on a rainbow of expressions that communicated the finest grade of mental state. Soon, it became the leading technique of all Europe. Centuries later, another Dutchman, Vincent van Gogh, would carry this art form to new heights. Van Gogh's use of texture in oils is unmatched. His intricately woven brushstrokes become his unique personal signature. Notice how different the tone, color, and textures are from Ter Borch's glass of lemonade. Though the medium is the same, the technique, the style, and the feelings are totally different. In 1888, Van Gogh painted this famous work, The Ladies of Arles. Cottages shows how Van Gogh, far ahead of his time, used color to express his passion. His intense temperament gave expressive power to his paintings and made him one of today's most beloved painters. These giant doors open to the room of early Spanish painting. You can see the scope and variety in the Hermitage collection in the contrast between Van Gogh's flamboyant and colorful post-impressionist works and the religious painting you are about to see. An unknown Spanish painter is the artist of this moving and delicately rendered story of Christ's entombment. A donor kneels in the corner. The work is thought to be from the small town of Castile, painted in the latter part of the 15th century. Ever so gently, 7 holy mourners lift Christ's lifeless body. Many details have symbolic meaning. Flowers symbolize heaven. In Domenico Capriolo's portrait of a young Italian gentleman from 1512, we see the Renaissance ideal. The portrait shows a man as the center of the world, the master of all that surrounds him. Paintings of the goddess Flora were immensely popular in Renaissance and Baroque times. Legend has it that Flora gave aroma to wine, charm to youth, sweetness to honey, and fragrance to blossoms. The painting is the work of the Italian artist Francesco Melzi, the last pupil of Leonardo da Vinci, who became heir to the master's famous notebooks. In this work, the artist Lucas Cranach the Elder gives voice to Renaissance ideals of beauty and perfection that by now had traveled as far north as Germany. The painting is entitled Portrait of a Lady. The landscape of the Danube is the faraway vista. In northern painting, it is a richly dressed, bejeweled noblewoman, not a goddess, who is chosen to represent the ideal of beauty. Another German Renaissance artist was Ambrosius Holbein, who died quite young at 26. His beautiful portrait of a gentleman, painted in 1518, was one of his last works. So strong is the Italian influence that the architecture in the background looks more Italian than German, as does the bare landscape in the distance. How unlike the previous portraits is this poetic image of an English lady painted in the 1770s. The artist is the Englishman Thomas Gainsborough, the son of a miller who made his living painting British nobility. This is society portraiture at its height. The quick, delicate brushwork gives the feeling of movement. Everything is so vivid, so spontaneous. This is a portrait of a noble Dutch woman. Her demeanor is reserved, precise, and proud. In her elegant black gown and closely fitted hat, this lady sits in a romantic landscape, complete with a classical statue under a stormy sky. Precise and meaningful details are exquisitely rendered. With regal posture, her face framed in blonde ringlets, she confronts the viewer's gaze with a challenging pride of social stature and self-worth. Rembrandt's Portrait of a Woman was painted in 1640. His masterful studies of the human mind through painting represent one of the peaks of psychological portraiture. It seems if he had only painted her eyes, our imagination would lead us to believe we know everything about the rest of the woman. Here is the French master Nicolas Poussin's Landscape with Polyphemus. For the love of Galatea, Polyphemus, son of Poseidon, dashed his rival Acis on the rocks. His blood formed a river. Following the tastes of Louis XIV, Poussin painted mainly classical themes. He lived and worked almost exclusively in Rome, sending many of his paintings back to France. These are his views on painting. The first requirement, fundamental to all others, is that the subject and the narrative be grandiose, such as battles, heroic actions, and religious themes. Those who choose base subjects find refuge in them because of the feebleness of their talents. In the room of Dutch paintings at the Hermitage, you will find Jacob van Ruysdael's mysterious work, The Marsh. Painted in the 1660s, its moody complexity has earned it the reputation as one of the finest works of Dutch landscape painting. The Dutch gave rise to an altogether different artistic trend from French landscape painting. In this Protestant secular society, the painting of landscape was deemed just as important as religious themes. Indeed, Dutch painters of this era turned out literally thousands of landscape paintings, many of which got poor reviews from Italian painters for being devoid of content and pleasing only to the eye. But Van Ruysdael was one of the best. He was called the philosopher painter, probably because of the depth he brought to the scene at hand. A special kind of landscape, the representation of a town, came into existence in Italy. Antonio Canaletto was an accomplished master of this form of painting. This is his reception of the French ambassador in Venice from the 1740s. From an embankment near the Doge's palace, Canaletto documents the pomp and circumstance of the expensive but ephemeral event of the ambassador's reception, all before the advent of photography. Such grandiose sums were spent on these events that leaders felt moved to somehow preserve them. This was a perfect job for a man with Canaletto's eye for detail. A century later, the urban landscape was a favorite subject of the Impressionist painter Camille Pissarro. This is his Boulevard Montmartre in Paris, painted in 1837 from a hotel window. Unlike Canaletto, he is not documenting a specific event. Pissarro was recording a day in the modern life of the beautiful and romantic city of Paris. He didn't aim at reproducing the trees or the architecture or the people in detail. Individually, the elements of his painting are barely discernible. But taken together, they recreate the pulse of life. The Hermitage is justly famous for its collection of romantic landscape paintings. George Morland is the artist of this work. A storm is approaching. The mood is one of anticipation. The motif is the storm, which even now is beginning with a great wind. Nature's fury will soon be transmitted directly to the people, the horses, the grass, and the trees. Everything that makes up this world of romantic painting. The landscape steps forward to become more than just background in this painting by an unknown English artist. A unique impression is created in this work. It's a union of portraiture and nature where the subject is portrayed as part of a romantic landscape filled with atmospheric effects. The landscape seems to express the inner thoughts or world of the subject's mind. Artists always have been fascinated by the material world, the everyday images of human life. But centuries had to pass before these articles, the objects of still life, became the subjects of painting. This painting is by the Dutch artist Frans Snyders. The French call still life nature morte. A literal translation would result in the words dead nature. But the Dutch, who are very committed to this genre, define still life as the serene life of things. Flies, butterflies, and all manner of living creatures might inhabit these works. If one thinks deeply about the meaning of the objects, the paintings become almost philosophical musings about the fragility of life and the passage of time. Nowhere is this more evident than in this next painting. The detail is so precise you can almost read the writing on the page. Still Life with a Skull is another work by Frans Snyders. We see a collection of the paraphernalia of everyday life, the games and whims of human beings who nevertheless are conscious of their own mortality. Although he lived to be only 37, the influence of the Italian artist Caravaggio was reflected in the work of painters across Europe. Caravaggio's masterpiece, The Lute Player from 1595, is one of the greatest treasures of the Hermitage. The composition could have been a good example of still life if not for the musician's figure. But according to the artist's intention, the objects play another role in the picture. They remind us of the transience of life, as brief in the scheme of things, perhaps, as the melody of a song. This work of spontaneous, almost photographic realism is thought to be a self-portrait. Caravaggio's strong chiaroscuro technique, partially illuminating figures against a dark background, was adopted by many of his contemporaries, and his influence can be seen in many of Rembrandt's works. It is extremely difficult to trace the origin of a new idea in painting. We know that Bernardo Strozzi painted the Healing of Tobit in 1644, relying on the traditions of religious painting. Even so, the work is painted as a scene of everyday life, the style of the Dutch and Flemish genre paintings we are about to see. It tells a Bible story of the healing of Tobit's eyes by an angel. The characters are ordinary people, family members rather than saints and religious figures. Even the family dog, a symbol of loyalty, looks on. The scene is human rather than divine. The Netherlands was the home of genre painting. This school of painting grew from the love of its people for their everyday life. This is the Musicale by Dirk Hals. Paintings like this one, Jan Steen's The Revelers, show Dutch genre painting at its finest. These generally small canvases focus on individual characters, mostly in interior scenes. The models for the painting are Jan Steen and his wife, who owned a tavern. Even today in the Netherlands, the Steen name is famous, or rather infamous. Keepers of an untidy home are said to live à la Steen. The painters of the Netherlands focused on folk life as no national artistic school had done before. Steen's A Game of Backgammon is set in a bordello. And here is his A Doctor's Visit. Just as in The Healing of Tobit, the entire family, each character, a unique personality, looks on to observe the young woman's plight. His work has wit, satire, and a certain melodramatic quality. Steen and the other genre painters lived in the time of Rembrandt, one of the great geniuses of painting. In 1665, Rembrandt turned his brush to David and Uriah, a biblical story. It is believed that the painting reveals the artist's dialogue with himself, reflections about life, death, and betrayal. Uriah, the husband of Bathsheba, has just been unwittingly condemned to death by his military commander, King David, who wants Bathsheba for his own. The characters stand separately yet together, united by the tragic moment. It's a painting that represents the late, mature style of Rembrandt. It was Catherine the Great who commissioned the Englishman Joshua Reynolds to fashion a painting that would glorify the young Russian nation. Reynolds turned to allegory and created the work you now see. The infant Hercules strangling serpents in his cradle was completed in 1788. Reynolds' illusion referred to the great difficulties the empress faced as she attempted to civilize her empire. In the myth, a jealous Hera sends snakes to strangle the infant Hercules, her husband's illegitimate son. But it was the infant Hercules who did the strangling, much as the young Russian nation might do to its detractors and enemies. In some schools of 18th century thought, historical painting was the highest art form. Giovanni Battista Tiepolo often chose such subjects. Here he paints Coriolanus at the walls of Rome. The sheer size of the painting is impressive. Originally executed for a Venetian palace, the canvas tells the story of a mother's heroism and a tale of patriotic valor. Coriolanus and his army stand at the walls of his hometown. Backed by powerful soldiers and weapons, he is about to destroy the town and take revenge for an insult. Only the sight of his mother brings Coriolanus to his senses, and he turns back his soldiers. Lofty themes, heroic images, and bright colors are the elements of Tiepolo's monumental historical paintings. This next Tiepolo work is called Triumph of Aurelian. Aurelian rides massive elephants to memorialize his African victories. He stands amid banners. This work is one of 5 in a series of paintings on the theme of classical victory. They were designed to be hung on the huge walls of the Venetian palace of a man who believed himself to be the descendant of Roman emperors. Every work of art springs from the artist's response to and translation of the world in which he lives. Paintings become windows into a living past, a past where the timeless themes of life and humanity can be seen in a new context and a new relation to our own lives. These highlights of the masterpieces provide a brief glimpse into the fabulous world of the Hermitage.